Florida State would rank in the top 5 in the Big Ten and also the SEC in revenue, so that they would be good additions to those two conferences, as Logan alluded to, and they'll have a full conversation coming up at 7 Eastern. The plan is still in progress, still being discussed. So the ACC has released the announcement of a plan that's underway. They have not released the details. Basically, that's coming in the next few months. As stated here per the ACC, basically the implementation of the success and incentives will come solely from performance of teams and revenue generating postseason competition. All other revenues will continue to be equally shared as currently outlined. So really the only major component of this that needs to be answered is what the distribution is going to be. How widely dispersed are those percentages going to be to favor the teams that generate the money versus the schools that don't generate most of the money once they go to postseason play? Because otherwise it's all going to remain the same. So there is incentive to go to the NCAA basketball tournament, men's and women's. There is incentive to go to a college football playoff, to go to major bowl games and earn the big paycheck. But we'll just have to wait and see what the ACC is willing to do from a percentage standpoint. You know, is this just a slightly bigger slice of the pie, or is this really going to weigh heavily toward those schools that are generating the postseason income?
It really just seems like they're trying to save themselves by doing these small little things, doesn't it, Mark? Like,
yeah,
press release was like under 500 words, just like, hey, we're working on this. We're going to try to do something here and try to do the obvious. I feel like that's what you should be doing in any conference, is if a team is making it as far as you can and going to the college football playoff or going to a New Year's Six bowl of that magnitude, these teams should be rewarded with higher revenue sharing. That's how it should be, I feel like. That still doesn't take away the brand that Florida State brings, or the brand that Clemson or Miami, TV ratings, where it's a little bit different than some other teams inside of the conference that aren't bringing that type of viewership or revenue and TV ratings. You know, that's not at the level of these teams, and most certainly Florida State, which is at the top of that, and the ACC. So, you know, that's a cool little thing that they're wanting to do. It's not going to happen this year, but it's going to go into 2024. They're trying to do that 2024, 2025, but just seems like that might have been a discussion that a lot of the presidents and ADs they had while in that spring meeting that they just had, what was it, early last week. So it's just trying to save some face a little bit, try to keep some people around, and maybe also kick some guys down below in the ACC to give them some, I don't know, some push to perform better. But still, that doesn't do anything for the FSU or Clemson or Miami, in my opinion.
No, it's a Band-Aid. It's a very small Band-Aid that's not going to cure the situation. Not at all. But they're trying to do something. The only two examples I can think of this to where, off the top of my head, I know and remember how these leagues distribute money is the Pac-12 commissioner 2 commissioners ago, the one before Larry Scott, they did something like this. So when USC was in its heyday under Pete Carroll, they were making a lot more money than everybody else because they were generating national championships and Rose Bowls and making more money than anybody else for the conference. So there was an unequal distribution of money. Now, I don't know the specifics of all that, but I just know that that was the case. Then Larry Scott, the Pac-12 commissioner who just left office about a year ago, he took over and he pushed to go to equal distribution. Now, whether the Pac-12 and their football decline was because of that, it certainly came at the same time. And maybe that was a bad move and a bad timing for the Pac-12 because it did coincide with the Pac-12's demise in football. I do know that the Big Ten, unless it's changed for as long as I've been a fan and been understanding of these situations, the Big Ten has equally distributed postseason money, bowl money, all of that. So you take somebody like Indiana that's gone years and years and years and years at times without even going to a bowl game, and Ohio State getting their 15 million from the Rose Bowl or whatever the figure is. It's pretty crazy. It's the highest. They're sharing just as much money with Indiana and Rutgers as they're receiving. So I guess, again, my point in all of this last week was when you're making the most money, then you seem to be a little bit more willing to divide it all evenly, saying with the mindset that, well, we're making the most money anyway, we'll distribute it equally. But when you're making what's soon to be the least amount of money or near it, speaking of the ACC, then and you see yourself as a Florida State where you're not just competing against the ACC, you've got a history since Bobby Bowden took over of competing nationally. So Florida State doesn't just look at its competition as Clemson and whomever else is going to be a contender in the ACC, as Mike Alford addressed when he met with the Board of Trustees. They see their competition as the elite programs in college football. They see, the top tiers of the SEC, fill in the blanks. We all know who the schools are. So they see themselves as we need to compete with them. So, I again, if they were making twice as much money or more, because it's going to be more like 3 times as much money once the Big Ten contract kicks in, then you're going to be more willing to say, hey, we're making more money than anybody else. We're fine. But when you're scrapping for every bit you can get and you're pulling more than your weight for the league, then it's understandable that you're going to push for this. Absolutely. I don't remember the numbers exactly off the top of my head, but our buddy Tony Altimore was going through the numbers. We did a Florida State deep dive here about a week ago, and he brought out all the academic numbers, the football numbers, athletic department, the whole thing. Football revenue, Florida State was in a really good place. They made, I think the number was 52 million. I might be off. Again, the video is posted. You guys can watch it. It was a live stream about 2 weeks ago. I think Florida State made like 52 million in football last year, football revenue. But when Ohio State's making 137 million in football revenue, you can keep up if you're really good at what you're doing, but it's kind of hard to do.
That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money.
They were 137, Texas at like 134, then went down from there.
Yeah. Florida State, just imagining what they could do with revenue. I don't think they're ever going to reach that mark, but that's fine. But Florida State being at where they were a couple of years ago, and then now finding its first real true successful season and reaching 10 wins. And it seems like they're about to go on a trend here, at least definitely starting off in this 2023 season of finding hopefully a deeper postseason run into an ACC championship, which would hopefully further them into their second college football playoff berth. The numbers start getting a little bit different there. Definitely with the brand that Florida State is. It brings a major fan base across the country, but specifically not only the fan base, but the college football world likes watching the Seminoles. And you go back to Bobby Bowden and what he was able to accomplish. And that's where a lot of the fandom there grew and built a base outside of Tallahassee, outside the state of Florida. And it's leveraged them to be able to bring in that much revenue. But when you're in a conference that you're kind of almost, everybody's like, how can we generate more revenue, and how does the sharing go? It gets you're put into a tough spot when, let's say, Florida State makes it to the ACC championship, makes it to a college football playoff this year, and that's your good thing out of it, is that you're going to get, a little incentive there to make it to the college football playoff or an ACC championship, but you're missing out on what some other teams are getting with the amount of money that is enormous compared to the ACC versus SEC, Big Ten. It puts Florida State in a rough spot, and I think Alford, Florida State's athletic director, is pushing and pushing and pushing as much as he can to get some of these other schools inside the ACC on board and not be solo dolo as much. And I know, just going off of a source I was talking to early or late last week, Alfred and Clemson, they're close in talks. These administrations are trying to work together here on a boatload of a lot of different things, but the main focus here is how do we bring our schools more money that we think that we deserve. I mean, Clemson making it to those national championships, college football playoffs, ACC championships, they deserve that. But Florida State on their trend upwards, and even when Florida State wasn't and at their best, they still were bringing in a good amount of revenue and bringing in ratings that deserve them to receive a good amount of money that goes into their pocket. But Florida State and Alfred, they're pushing to. I think it's a mix of both things. How can the ACC get better for right now in the short term, but also figure out a way to get out of it? Make some money now, but get out of it at the end of it all.
All right, folks, leave your comments and questions. We'll get to them. And again, as this basically unfolds as a story, which it will, again, we just have the parameters of it. We know what's going to happen. They announced it. They're working on a model. So it is going to happen. And again, it's going to be interesting to see to what degree they share the percentages